We are joined every Wednesday at this time by Elliot Tepper, Carleton University political science professor. We talk about all the big stories in the world and how they affect Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
How are you this morning?
Well, look at all the big stories. How do we possibly cover them? I'm fine. I love our summers in Ottawa.
Yes, and this is a special one.
Yeah,
150th birthday of Canada, and lots of reasons to celebrate this great country that we have, but we look at everything through the lens of the world around us, where there are no borders that can protect against some of the forces that are at play in the world today. So we'll talk more about Jeff Sessions and James Comey and Washington coming up in a few minutes. But let's start with the elections in the UK and France and what we've learned from all of that.
Well, I like countries. I like elections. As you know, we cover the world wherever there's an election. And I like countries that have elections. And these were two very interesting ones. I suppose we've been covering the UK election and Brexit before it and so forth. What are the lessons of the election that has now shown a dramatic shift within the United Kingdom and its politics? There's a bunch of lessons. I'll start with an insight from a very experienced observer of the UK scene who said, you know, you have to be pretty bad to make Jeremy Corbyn look good.
Right.
And so one lesson is...
And that's what ended up happening in this election, right?
Exactly what happened.
He was widely dismissed as the wrong guy to be leading the party, an easy candidate to run against that probably factored into the decision to call the election early. They wanted to run against him and not against who might have succeeded him if Labour MPs had turfed him as leader and found somebody else.
Well, there's a bunch of lessons. One of them is be very cautious about assuming weakness of the opposition. Yeah. Be careful when you throw away a majority for no good reason. And that's the message that the Conservative Party is now hammering home to their own leader. She had a working majority in Parliament. She had 3 more years of a working majority in Parliament and decided, because the opposition looked weak, to go for it, and the public decided to punish her for that. So I suppose that's one of the lessons. I think something that you've touched on earlier today in another part of this show, was the rise of the youth. One of the fascinating things to me, Mark, has been watching globally, and remember, we also cover the Middle East, and we cover Russia, for example. There's been the rise of the youth, so that we have Jeremy Corbyn, hardly a young guy himself, attracting the millennial vote. This is now others are saying he's the Bernie Sanders. Well, okay, we have to acknowledge that, as you and I have been emphasizing over and over again, it's not just populism of the right. There is a populism of the left. It is shaking politics everywhere. It is shaking politics in the UK. It shook them there because in this case, the millennials not only flocked to that party, they actually showed up to vote. And we harken back to Brexit. You know, one of the lessons there is, elections are won by those who show up to vote, and the millennials didn't. They didn't show up for Hillary Clinton in the numbers either. And would they show up this time? Yes, they did. So one of the lessons, I think, to take a look at across the world right now is the rise of youth. Conservative leadership here just passed to another very young person, a 39-year-old, and you were just talking about the NDP and the young people there. Russia has just had massive protests all across the country, 11 time zones, and these are Putin's children. These are people raised under only Putin who are now revolting against corruption. And in the UK, it turns out they did turn out to vote. I think another interesting lesson is that platforms actually can matter. We've gotten used to the idea that, well, who actually cares about platforms? Why did the millennials show up to vote? Well, part of it is just the populism and they were tired of the conservative. They wanted to upset the status quo. There were goodies in that. There were specific appeals to specific target audiences in the platform, and it seemed to work. We'll be coming to Trump. Well, in the United States, they said the cliche was that Trump's people took him seriously, but not literally, whereas the opposition took him literally, but not seriously. Now, I want to come to this later, platforms matter. In the UK, that platform seemed to be a key factor in the success. I think the regrets it is also a factor here within that particular vote. Apparently a lot of people, including the millennials, who said, oh, we didn't show up last time to vote, and look what happened, and Brexit happened, and this time we're going to, well, it's too late. The only difference now is the bargaining position of the UK has been weakened significantly. But the ostensible reason for the call of that election was to strengthen the government's hand going into Brexit. They wanted a hard Brexit, whatever that means. And now they're saying, well, it'll be a soft Brexit. Hey, it takes two to tango. The EU has to agree. Oh, no, you can't really have all the benefits of membership without paying the cost. You know, if you want to be a member of the club, you join the club. You want out of the club. Well, all this is the conversation going on right now inside the UK. Brexit is going to happen, but how?
And I want to come back to that first point, though, because I'm trying to think of an example where a party with a majority government that's called an early election has been successful with that.
Oh, I know one, Jean Chrétien. He did it twice, I think.
He called an early election one time where Stockwell Day had challenged him to as the opposition leader. And so it was hard for Stockwell Day to then turn around and say, you're wasting our time with this election.
But he didn't have to say yes.
He didn't have to say yes. I'm just saying it didn't play out on the campaign trail the same way it might in a different environment, because he responded to a call from the opposition to call an election rather than doing it on his own. But David Peterson, of course, in Ontario, famously called an early election 3 years into a majority, and that's how Bob Rae became premier.
Indeed, and we had Rae days and everything afterwards. So, yes, it is if there's a lesson for Canada in all this, we have right now a government which has a majority. The opposition doesn't really have leaders right now. The temptation must be very grave, but take a look at what happened to Theresa May.
I'm not sure that Justin Trudeau's really thinking about that, and would, probably would stick to the schedule anyway. But I think there is a pretty powerful lesson in that you're much better off. There's just something, you call it karma, if you will, but there's just something about, you know what, if you stick to the timetable that was prescribed by somebody other than you, then it's not on you. As soon as you say, well, we need an election now, then you're going to wear the consequences of that decision. And
that is a lesson, I think, that not only in Canada but around the world.
Yeah. I'm just surprised it still needs to be learned after all the examples.
The Conservative Party over there seems to have trouble learning lessons. Yeah. This Brexit call was, I thought at the time, more quietly, not on air, but why would you risk everything? And it was hubris. And there's two examples now in a row for the Conservatives of rolling the dice, and turning it over to the public, and losing. And in both cases, it could end up costing the leader who made that decision his or her job. David Cameron lost his job over Brexit. Theresa May could lose her job over this snap election. It's entirely possible. And then the UK would be basically with untried leadership heading into Brexit and facing a hostile world in other ways, and the trade negotiations. I think another thing out of that election, not yet underlined sufficiently, was the success of the Conservative Party in Scotland. And what does that mean? Well, it means two things to me. We have yet another woman leader of a party. That's the Scottish branch of the Conservative Party. It's headed by a woman. So is the SNP there, and in Ireland, and at the minute anyway, in the UK. So the fate of the future of the United Kingdom is very much in the hands of women leaders, and in some cases the rise of youth. All of those are very interesting, but to be watched. 12 votes, that also means the SNP is unlikely to go for a referendum on independence now because they've been weakened. Many implications when you call an election.
All right, so let's talk quickly about the French elections, what they mean for Emmanuel Macron, and then we can take a break and come back and talk more about Jeff Sessions.
Well, Macron, among other things, shows what we've been talking about, the rise of youth. You were emphasizing when he took over the leadership and started to make gains. He was, 39 when he was elected, something like that. So again, we have a remarkably young leader who suddenly is emerging as perhaps the main leader in cooperation with Merkel, and he would like to also with Theresa May or with the UK, the leader of a pro-European, a pro-EU, a liberal international order, free trade, all of those, the traditional pillars of the post-war world. He is an avatar of those, and he's young. It also means, one other lesson, that the progressive wave in terms of overthrowing the old order has succeeded. That is, it's progressive but not populist. He has destroyed the traditional party system of the Fifth Republic in France, shattered it. But at the same
time, if you take a step back for a second and just pause, here is a guy who is not even 40 years old, founded a political party barely a year ago,
a movement,
and now is the president and is winning seats in the elections as well.
This first round of the election was an overwhelming victory for him and an overwhelming defeat of all the traditional parties. The populist parties of the left and right in Europe and certainly in France have now taken a beating by this particular young but disruptive force. Now let's go back to another good lesson that we talked about. Platforms matter. We have a remarkable phenomenon of this young leader is going to transform politics. Everybody's behind him. He might get 3/4 of the seat, unheard of, in the final round. At the same time, after that, he has to govern. He's governing with half of the people elected not ever have been in politics at all before. A wonderful mix of people, from all kinds of backgrounds, including a professional woman bullfighter who got elected. So but he's got a platform. And Mark, that platform is controversial. Right now we're talking about his triumphs. How many months will it be before we're talking about, the marches in the street as he tries to change the labor laws, for example, of France? Platforms matter.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about everything that's unfolding in Washington with Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. Elliot Tepper is with us from Carleton University every Wednesday on Ottawa Today. So let's turn to Washington and Jeff Sessions' testimony. And there's so much else that's going on as well. Donald Trump, for example, called the Congressional Health Care Act mean, even though he had praised it a couple of weeks ago and said it was a great plan. So there's just a lot going on. But of course, dominating the headlines is this storyline involving James Comey, Jeff Sessions, and the president.
Right. There's so many different ways to combat this. Pick up on some of the themes we've gotten so far. If Jeremy Corbyn becomes prime minister, which is a possibility in the UK, he would take their foreign policy in a radically different direction. In France, we seem to have something like a status quo centrist, drawing from the left and the right. And in the United States, we have an embattled president who has increasingly dark clouds hanging over his administration. But meanwhile, and this is something we've tried to emphasize over and over again, platforms matter. The business of the Republican Party, their agenda continues. Well, what did we learn from the Comey and Sessions? Well, we learned one thing is everybody's a winner and everybody's a loser. That is, if you liked one side or the other, you got exactly what you wanted. Certainly, absolutely, Comey said things that were going to show that the president was X or Y. The president came out and his lawyer came out and said this was absolute vindication. And it was. The point of this comment is that each of the sides here can spin a coherent story, convincing to their own base that the things are moving in their direction. So the Republican Party, which seems to be in such disarray, and we've used the word shambolic in terms of the administration and so forth, they are putting together a lovely, coherent story that everything that their followers want out of them, they're doing. They've shaken up Washington, and they are being attacked, and that just is a good thing. It shows that they are winning in their battle against the vested interests, and they are doing things for the people that elected them. And the Democrats, of course, are saying, you're betraying everybody. You're betraying your own base. You're betraying America. So you can get that out of both of these, if I could use the word, sessions we've had with Comey and Sessions. Sessions yesterday was fascinating again. He gave ammunition for both sides once again. For junkies like me watching the two sides battle it out. The Republicans, even though this is considered the most bipartisan of committees, the Intelligence Committee of the Senate, as sharply contrasted from the House, which is openly partisan, was supposed to be more bipartisan, and yet the lines were clearly drawn. So Jeff Sessions got out of that without saying anything that would his boss isn't going to call up and fire him now. Jeff Sessions' primary job there as Attorney General, he's got a couple jobs. Of course, the official title is, he's in charge of all of law operations in America. That includes the FBI, but and a couple others. But really, he's there to protect the president. The president put a loyalist there.
Right.
The president knew that there were likely to be many, many challenges to him, and they put in charge of 9,000 lawyers or something like that in the Department of Justice. He put one of his own, and the anger that that Donald Trump apparently had was over Sessions not being stronger. Why would you recuse yourself on the Russia file? Well, I took that initially as being, why aren't you focusing on leaks instead of the Russia file? But if the real concern is the Russia file, then he's being let down by his number one protector. So there's more than one way to look at this. I think the breadcrumbs left, as people are saying, and I've said this on air before, Comey was very carefully listening, broadcasting to the world, broadcasting to the intelligence committee that he was talking about and to, but he was also really talking about the special counsel, and he was laying the ground there for more work having been fired. So the guy in charge of investigating the president got fired. Can the special counsel be fired? And that's the latest wrinkle in all this. And the answer is not very easily.
Very quickly, Donald Trump had a cabinet meeting the other day and went around the table and everybody praised him.
Yeah, praise me. Trump
himself said that they've accomplished more in the first 5 months than almost any other president, maybe with the exception of FDR. The evidence doesn't support that, of course, and many people say his agenda is not moving forward, even with the Republican Congress.
Certainly the major items are the Obamacare replacement is now in the hands. The House apparently bollocksed it all up. It's to the Senate, who said it's dead on arrival. We're going to rewrite the whole thing.
Yep.
Behind closed doors with no hearings, affecting America's future on that. So, and certainly the tax reform, which is part of that health bill, has been held up. All of that's true. The infrastructure, the big ticket item, is being held up. But the Republican agenda, remember, platforms count. And the platform of that Republican Party is moving ahead with executive orders from the president. And if you like the direction, if you like that platform, and many do, then this is a very successful operation. Dodd-Frank is being repealed, all kinds of things on the environment, et cetera. The big ticket item, as you and I have been talking about, and it's insufficiently talked about, the big thing here is what's going to happen in the elections which are coming. Do not bet against the Republicans in the congressional elections coming. They have a coherent policy, and they're very good on the hunt for power.
All right. Thank you, Elliot.